We're here with Mark Holmes, and he's a bit of a bait buff. He writes a lot of stuff in Carpworld, and he says things that makes you think about what you're actually doing and how you're fishing. So I've got some questions for Mark to see what he feels and thinks about bait. Now then, Mark, hiya.
That was a great introduction, by the way, Steve. I hope I can live up to that introduction.
Oh, we'll make you look good. We'll make you look good.
All right.
You've been really heavily involved in bait for 20 more years.
Yeah.
I said, what would you say is the biggest development you've seen in the last 2 decades?
I think basically, if you scrape it all back, and I try not to be too scientific, dull it down a little bit so it gets to grassroots level. The preoccupation of trying to create a bait that was the highest percentage of protein to now something that gets the balance of nutrition and attraction collectively. 20 years ago we were so transfixed in getting baits that were of a high protein value irrespective of the attraction. Now we know that carp can only absorb about 28 to 30% of protein, so if I created baits like I did in the past of 80% protein, the reality was 50% of it was coming out of the back end. So I don't want to waste the money, because milk proteins, which predominantly what they were very expensive and have got more expensive. So the reality is the big change now is that baits are predominantly fish meal based, which is LT94, and most of what's available commercially out there, they represent 40% of the makeup of bait, and the other 60% is the nutrition. In the past, you've been transfixed with milk proteins and getting the protein level high up. That's been the real big change, Steve.
No, that's excellent, because most people don't really understand bait, don't really know what's in it. We've gone such a big way for off-the-shelf baits that people have stopped making their own baits.
Yeah.
But you do a lot of stuff with DNA baits, and I gather that you've got a new range of hook baits out. Are you going to tell us about those?
Yeah, we do, and to all you guys out there, forgive the gratuitous plug, but the reality is that people said to me, look, Holmesy, you do these off-the-wall things and all the rest of it, and you know, can you open up your secrets a little bit more? And I kind of decided that now was the time, because it was an age thing. I didn't want to be one of these boring old farts, pardon my language, that people thought, well, he never tells us anything, he's not interesting. But I wanted to try and get the point across that it's the hook bait that I work on, Steve. So the work that I've been doing with DNA in developing these Evo systems, along with Steve Carey and Jason Trout, has been primarily based upon the hook bait. And it was a mental shift of changing the ideology of most anglers, in that the hook bait was generally the last one to be picked up. We wanted to try and turn it on its head, so that the concept of that was that why don't we go for the hook bait being picked up first. And that kind of fit in nicely with what I think the majority of the readers of Carpworld and Crafty Carper are, which is predominantly weekend anglers, guys who have a busy family life, and they're looking to get the time on the bank as a premium. So they're looking to be fishing from the first minute to the last, not simply think I've got 5 days and for 2 days I'll simply put a load of bait in and wait. So I wanted to get back to the hunter mentality rather than the trapper. I wanted people to go out and catch these fish rather than dig a big hole and the fish falls in it.
Right, well, I've seen that you've got a big bag of goodies underneath
I
your seat.
have indeed, yeah.
So what sort of things we got here?
Well, basically we've got the Evo kit, and within the kit it allows you to fish, and it's predominantly a bottom bait concept.
Right.
So the reality is that they are hook baits, so it doesn't in any way, shape or form impinge on your loose feed.
Yeah.
So the loose feed is still the same. The reality is that if you put this concept onto all of your loose feed, it would detract from what you're doing.
Right, I get you now.
Because if we've got 500 freebies and 1 boosted hook bait, then it's going to warm, isn't it? If we've got 500 boosted hook baits, then they all become the norm, and very expensive for you to fish with. So the reality is we came up with this concept, and if I open it up for the people outside, you will see that it's a nice big thing. The first thing I would say to people is the instructions. We've spent a real detailed time at putting forward the instructions, and within there, Steve, there's photographs. And what I always say to people is, first thing with this concept, put the kettle on, sit down, have a read of that, and then when you've finished it,
you can see from your journalistic background, it's been very well laid out. I mean, if you see that, guys, it's just a quick one. I'm sure we'll cover it again at a later date, but very clear, very simple to see how the whole system works and just how you do it.
Well, you'll know, Steve, from you, the many years you've been in the editorial game, the reality is that whether people like me will lament that people don't read things, they don't. So a picture paints 1,000 words.
Definitely.
So what it's been is it's very much pictorial, so people can see how this range works, and there's the instructions. But basically there's two concepts. You've got the boosted hook baits, and we've got 50 of these. If I can get...
They're that good that they have to lock them up so you can't actually get out, because the fish jump out and get them.
Tell me about it. We've got 50 cured hook baits. And again, little touches like silica gel. The one thing I say about cured up baits, I've been using them for over 20 years, is that the worst thing about salt is the osmosis effect. And when I used to tell them how to do this in the garage, bless them, they'd be in a garage where there was a lot of moisture about, and the salt would get wet and they start to mould it. You've got to keep it really dry. So there's the silica gel in there, and you have got 50 of those in a pot. Now before the carp spawn, Steve, that's all you need. And basically one important point to this is that people said to me, well, Holmes, can't I just simply cure my own hook baits, whatever company that's from? Yes, you can, but the reality is that when you cure hook bait and you take all the moisture out, when you actually put that back into the lake, as the moisture goes in, it breaks it down quickly. So if you're not careful, you will end up, after 3 or 4 hours, it coming off the air. And it's what I call the bread flake principle. As a kid, I couldn't fish bread flake because when I reeled it in, I just got a bare hook. And I always assumed I wasn't fishing. The reality was I was. But Jason, bless him, said, Holmes, we have to come up with a concept where it'll stop on the hook, on the hair rather, for about 12 to 14 hours. So these will stop on the air for about 12 to 14 hours. And I was laughing with the guys at the show. If you haven't got a bite with these in 12 to 14 hours, you've got it in the wrong place.
Oh, so it'll even work for somebody like me.
And then after the boosted hook baits, we've got the dedicated liquids, and we've got the dedicated powders.
Very distinctive, those are very distinctive. We'll do some close-ups afterwards, it's so different, very worth a closer look.
Yeah. And with the powders and the liquids, Steve, one of the things that I say to people is that people can have a concept that, yeah, what Holmes has come up with, what the guys at DNA have come up with, is just simply a paste strap. The reality is that the ingredients used for the powder and the liquid are defatted, and for all the guys out there, I don't want this to become a bait thesis, so I'll try and dull it down. But they've been defatted to increase the solubility in the water. So when you talk about things like GLM, liver powders, krill powder, these sort of natural attractors, they inherently have fat in there. And when you make a base boiling mix, you want that fat because it makes it palatable.
Balanced, yeah.
You know. But when you actually want it to leak quickly, you need to take them out. So a lot of work's gone into the powders to get them defatted. And the simple fact is that sachet, which contains, I think, 50 grams, is actually, I don't know, about £1.50, £2. If you put that into a base mix, it would cost A, a lot of money, and B, more importantly, you wouldn't be able to roll it, Steve. Because when you actually went to stick it out, it'd be breaking up. And the other little extras that we have is obviously, we have a little spoon, and we have the tub as well. So it's a little bit user-friendly, and people say, oh yeah, it looks very nice and very neat and compact. But the reality is that it's a concept that people can devise for themselves. And what I wanted to try and get across, Steve, is that you know as well as I do, places like Linear, great waters, but the reality is that you're not fishing just for the carp anymore.
Fishing against everybody else?
You're fishing against everybody else. This concept allows you to fish your own bait and your own concept, because the individual sachets that you can buy mean that you can put greenlit mussel around an SLK bait and know even if the guy next door is fishing a DNA bait, he's not fishing
exactly
that
like you are.
bottom bait.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where the concept comes from.
Sort of fine-tuning and making your own unique baits, because any combination can match together, so you are unique with your attractor package.
Yeah, and the reason why we called it evolution, and hopefully the guys and girls outside in the Carpworld will see it, is that as the months and years progress, we're going to take people and we're going to try them to get to think about bait again. You know, I sometimes get labelled as a bit of a maverick, someone who's very uncorporate.
Oh, I don't know why.
Not at all. The reality is, for me, is that what I always try and do is return the idea of how to catch fish back to the angler. When I've been showing the guys this weekend, they've been saying, can we buy this now? No, I don't want them to buy it yet. I want them to devise it themselves.
That's brilliant, Mark. Hopefully you'll be writing again in Carpworld.
I will indeed, Steve.
And you'll let us a few more of those secrets out.
Brilliant.
Cheers,
Thanks for your
mate.
time, mate.